Day by Day Kids Bible, Day 221, Closing the Gates. Nehemiah 13, 4 through 11, 15 through 27, 30 through 31. Now there was a priest who had been in charge of the storerooms. These were at the worship house, but he was a friend of Tobiah's. He had given Tobiah a big room there. I wasn't in Jerusalem at that time. I had gone back to Babylon. I had gone back to serve the king. Later, I asked the king if I could come back to Jerusalem. That's when I learned about Tobiah's room at the worship house. I was very unhappy about this. I threw Tobiah's things out of the room. I found out something else. People were supposed to give the priest and the singers food, but the people weren't giving it. The priest and the singers had to go back home. They had to work in their fields. They couldn't serve God at the worship house. So I called the leaders together. "Why do you forget about the worship house?" I asked. Then I saw people working on the worship day. They brought food into Jerusalem to sell. They were loading grain on donkeys. They brought in grain, wine, grapes, figs, and other food. But I told them not to sell food on that day. Other men brought in fish and other things. They sold these on the worship day. I said, "What are you doing? You're making the worship days seem like nothing. Your families from long ago did the same thing. That brought us the trouble we're having now. You'll make God angry at us again." So I gave an order. The city gates were to be closed on worship day. They would close in the evening. They wouldn't open until the worship day was over. I put some of my men at the gates. Then nothing could be brought in on worship day. Sometimes a seller would spend the night outside the gate. But I said, "Why spend the night here? Don't do it again. If you do, I'll come and get you." They never came on the worship day again. Remember me for doing this, God. Be kind to me, because your love is great. I also saw men from Judah marry women from other lands. Half of the children didn't even know the language of Judah. I told these men they were wrong. I made them make a promise. They wouldn't let their children marry people from other lands. I said, "Isn't that how Solomon sinned? There was no other king like him. God loved him, but even Solomon sinned. The women he married led him into sin. They were from other lands. Do you have to do this too? You aren't obeying God if you marry women from other lands." I made priests get rid of everything that didn't please God. I gave every priest a job to do. I made sure that people knew when to bring their gifts. Remember me, God, and be kind to me, my God. Singers on the Wall, Nehemiah 12, 27 through 44, 13, 1 through 3, 12 through 14. Now the day came to give the city wall of Jerusalem to God. It was time to say that God was in charge of it. It belonged to him. So people from the family group of Levi came to help. They led songs to give thanks to God. They played music with cymbals, harps, and lyres. The singers came together too. They had built towns for themselves around Jerusalem. I told Judah's leaders to go up on top of the wall. I chose two big groups of singers to give thanks. One group went on top of the wall to the right. Half of the leaders followed them. Ezra led them. They marched to the fountain gate. They went up to the steps of David's city. Then they went to the water gate. The next group of singers went the other way. I followed them on top of the wall. Half the people followed too. We went past the ovens tower to the wide wall. We went over the fish gate and the 100 tower. We went to the sheep gate. We stopped at the guard gate. The two groups of singers gave thanks. Then we went to the worship house. I went too. Half of the leaders went. The priests went. They took their horns. The singers sang. That day many gifts were given to God. That's because God had made the people very happy. The women and children showed their joy too. The happy sound could be heard far away. Everyone brought their gifts of grain, wine, and oil. The gifts were put in storerooms. We chose men to be in charge of the storerooms. These were men we could trust. Remember me, God. Don't forget what I've done for your worship house. Then Moses' law book was read out loud. All the people could hear it. They did what it said.